Gauge. The honest truth.
Met Benito Vergatini.
Smile 90.4 FM.
Joining us this evening to confront a harrowing truth, how digital platforms by design are enabling child predators and driving a surge in online exploitation, is researcher at the Center for Analytics and Behavioral Change, Kyle Jenssen. Kyle, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me, and good evening, Benito.
The latest report from the CABC, The State of Child Predation Online, which time frame does it cover and how was it compiled?
So it goes from May last year until May 2024 until July 2025. And it came about really through several different reports over 2024, where we picked up some of these harrowing links and comments and posts. And initially we wanted to incorporate it into prior reports, but we put a bit of a hold on it and said, let's give us a bit more time. Let's dig a bit deeper and let's look behind the veil, for lack of a better way of putting it, and give this topic the space it needs. And that's really what led up to the drafting and the publishing of this report, Benito.
And which platform features most actively do you feel from the report contribute to the escalation of online child predation?
It has to be, I'd say, X, formerly known as Twitter. However, I do want to caveat that by saying that we did a lot of work across different platforms. They're not reflected in the report, but they form the backdrop of some of the findings in this report. But the number one, I would say, has to be X in terms of publicly available content, child sexual abuse material.
And how are AI-generated images changing the legal landscape around child abuse material, Kyle?
They're definitely making it a bit easy, a lot easier, in fact. There was a story I read a couple of weeks ago where a prime minister, I forget the country, stood up in parliament and she showed a picture of her naked, and it was an AI-generated image. Now, there's been this AI generation can be seen as a sort of extension of the deepfake pandemic that we experienced also a few years ago, where we've already seen that these newer technologies can be used to harm children, to the extent where one child committed suicide. I think this was in Ireland. So it does make it a lot easier to exploit children and to expose them to these psychological, emotional harms, as well as harming themselves.
From the report, how has online grooming become normalized? In what ways has this been done?
So, this was an interesting aspect of this report, and it was a conscious choice by the CABC to split it into two parts. We did the first part of this report does a narrative analysis, where it looks at these types of conversations that are happening online. And what we found in terms of the conversations, certainly, was that a lot of individuals, they create false dichotomies, such as the one aspect was a religious aspect, saying where concerns were highlighted about young women, 18-year-old getting married to men that are 50-year-old, 45-year-old and older, for example. And this was highlighted as morally questionable. But then what we also found was a bit of pushback against that, saying that, no, marriage is better than sexual promiscuity at the younger age. So we find this false dichotomy where, and it is a bit of a misogynist thing in our culture, where, there's concerns raised about this. But in addition to these types of narratives, we also found that there's a culture of dating young. There's a culture of saying that, when a girl reaches the age of 12, the coded word phrase was, after 12 is lunch.
Oh, no.
And what that means, Benito, I'm guessing you already know what it means, but it means that after the age of 12, young women can be engaged in sexual relations. Now, along with that, what we find is that there's certain posts where they say that no, this 13-year-old child engaged willingly in sexual relations with the older man, and therefore the older gentleman shouldn't be in prison. And then one of the more sort of soft, I don't want to say soft, but interesting narratives that we found, and it's a very problematic narrative, is around teenage pregnancies, where individuals claim that no, the father cannot be arrested, because if you arrest the father, then the child loses a caregiver and a supporting figure in their lives, which really removes the problem here. The issue isn't, we should never have reached that point. If you get what I'm saying, we should never be at that point where this is even in question, or this is a statement you can make. But so we find we also found explicit posts around engaging in sexual relations with children, definitely. Particularly, I'd say in the second part of this report, which actually reflects some of the sexualization of children online, where we found those harrowing posts, really, those very quite disgusting posts.
It's quite appalling, actually, just to hear you share this, Kyle, because the perpetrators, the men, are essentially avoiding responsibility. I mean, having sex with a 12-year-old is illegal. It's statutory rape. Saying that the girl is willing or not is irrelevant. You are the major in this relationship. You are committing an illegal act. And then to also gaslight the teenager in terms of the support for a pregnant woman, it's just quite astounding.
Yes, and now it really was, some of the narratives that came out was really appalling to see. And as you rightly mentioned, it is avoiding responsibility, because it's this notion that, no, we must, victim blaming, I think, is a perfect word to describe it, as well as this phrase called whataboutism. But then I also want to draw attention to that posting of the content aspect. You mentioned earlier how they sort of facilitate social media platforms facilitate this.
Yes.
And when we looked at the child sexual abuse material being posted on X, what we found is that these accounts, they don't post every single day. What they do is they'll post on, let's take today, for example, they'll post 5 to 10 images and or videos. And when I refer to videos, I'm referring to very explicit videos in school clothes or a clear minor. They'll post 5 to 10 of those, and then they'll go quiet for a few days. And then they'll post again quite a few posts, and then rinse and repeat, go quiet. And that was really interesting for us to observe, because that indicates that it's not originating on this platform. Well, obviously it's not originating on this platform, but it does indicate that these accounts are sourcing these images and videos either from different platforms or from individuals that are sending them to it, or sending them that images and videos.
Kyle, are you able to walk us through how the breadcrumbing works and why it's an effective grooming tactic?
The breadcrumbing is it's a very interesting notion, because it's also one of the sort of tangential issues that we come across on these report. And in the context of child grooming, it can take various forms. I think firstly, it can take the form of the sort of financial benefit, where I give you some money and then I go quiet. because unfortunately we do live in a country where we have vast poverty rates. And then this is sort of the hook that will get the minors in. But then we also have the manipulation, and the gaslighting is the word you used earlier, where because of that power differential, that power and maturity that the perceived maturity that the older individual holds, they say the right things, they do the right things to soften them, to soften children, to get them over, to win them over. And really, so it can manifest in various different ways, but it's definitely one of the big issues that we are dealing with in this country.
What sort of coordinated action from the reports do you feel will allow parents, educators, community leaders to better protect children online and offline?
The primary thing, and I'm always hesitant to say this because it's again a reflection of the country we live in. Unfortunately, it's that we need to have the relevant safety protocols in place. I think number one thing for me is only to have your child have a cell phone when they're of that age where they can understand. You can have a conversation about the risks and harms in society. It's to have child lock on your phone. If your child is on any sort of social media platform, it's to have that platform locked down so that only the closest friends can see the individuals that are part of your child's group, can see the images, can see the posts, just to have that sort of safety protocols in, along with the child lock mechanisms on the phone. But naturally, this only goes so far, and you never know who in your circle can exploit the images, can go and download those images. And that's really where platform accountability comes in for me, because there's just too little being done in terms of, you see, we have this massive development in developed countries where there's very quick action against these types of material being shared online, child sexual abuse material. However, in developing countries, because of the culture, the context, the language barriers, we're not finding that same stringent approach being taken. And we really do need to hold platforms accountable as society, in addition to having these safety protocols in place.
And it's quite interesting, as we're having this conversation, the Australians have basically effectively barred children from accessing social media up until a certain age.
And that's a very good and a very strong step in order. They recognize the danger that exists. You know, I had a webinar earlier where we spoke about the dark edges of the internet being folded out. And that's what we need to do as society. And Australia is taking that step to say that, no, there's this huge risk that exists with children especially. So we're going to implement this and see how far it gets us. And it's a very good step. And so in absence of that, we as parents need to take those steps. Government also has a role to play.
Researcher at the Center for Analytics and Behavioral Change, Kyle Jenssen. As always, appreciate your time, Kyle, and insights. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me, Benito.
The Honest Truth.
Met Benito Vergatini. Smile 90.4 FM.